This episode of Marshall's Bazaar will be another movie review, specifically a movie review of Blade Runner 2049. As always, spoiler alert. Hello, people of the universe, and welcome to another movie review episode of Marshall's Bazaar, starring me, Marshall Brown.
And me, Mitch Thompson.
Oh, yeah, how'd you get in here?
I actually don't know. I think I just sort of came through the ether.
Actually, to be honest with you, you should be asking me how I got here, because right now we are recording this episode of Marshall's Bazaar in Mitch's house in good old Greensboro.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we went to see the movie yesterday, and it was pretty good. However, I think I have a little gripe with it, because I think now I have to actually watch it again to get the whole thing, because I was confused throughout.
Yeah, that's how they get your money. You gotta watch it multiple times just to actually understand it, and by the time you understand it, then they made like $50 million at the box office over the weekend. But of course, I'm gonna see it again because Mark and Kelly want to see it, and I'd be glad to watch it again just for that excuse. Oh no, I'm not trying to understand it again. I've got friends. I've got people I want to see this with. But today, yeah, we're mostly just talking about both movies in the span of things, Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I brought Mitch here because he was the one that actually introduced this movie, and, well, the original Blade Runner, to me. I was just, screwing around, calling A's, and he was just like, let's watch this. This is like one of my favorite movies ever. And now, it's definitely one of my favorite movies ever, including what this sequel brought to the table. So, with that said, why don't we at least just start with the basic story about a future where replicants are being created for people to just straight up use and exploit. And of course, if there are any replicants that just so happen to begin to have feelings, then the Blade Runners come to retire them.
Yes.
Not retire. It's that they use a word. They use a specific word.
It's not murder.
No,
it's just you retire the replicant. That's what it's called.
Yeah, but like that's basically just double meaning for, kill them off.
So again, the first movie, in case you've never seen Blade Runner and you haven't even heard of what it is, and you're tuning into this podcast, there's this, it's set in Los Angeles. The first movie is set in Los Angeles in 2019.
So we got 2 years until they start making replicants.
Yeah, and flying cars. Don't forget flying cars.
And Atari and Pan Am making a comeback.
Yes, exactly. There's some product placement for Atari and Pan Am, which ended up being a gag because they sort of went by the wayside, and
because the original movie was made in '82.
Yeah, and then the newest one made an allusion to it, and it was pretty obvious that they did it because they were trying to appeal to the fans of the original.
But the original,
yeah. So we got a little off topic. So again, there's this corporation called the Tyrell Corporation, and they manufacture what are called replicants. They're not actually humans. They weren't born. However, they're not actually machines. They're biorobotic. So when I do say biorobotic, you'll think kind of like a machine, and that's somewhat true, but really they're just copies of humans.
It's like
bioengineered.
A Terminator, but like somewhat nicer.
Yeah, and so they're manufactured for people in the beginning and for slave labor. Primarily, actually, for slave labor, but they were initially allowed on Earth, and then they started to feel, it's kind of like the iRobot trope, where humans create artificial humans, and then the artificial humans realize that they're being oppressed, and they all, sort of rebel against humans and try to kill the actual creators, and so then they hire a bunch of cops called Blade Runners to go and kill them all.
One cop in particular, good old Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, falls in love with one of the replicants in the first movie, and the whole story is just revolving around Decker's relationship to the replicants and whether or not he might be a replicant himself.
Which, it turns out that Deckard is not actually a replicant. However, he has... So, the plot of the second movie revolves around this actual replicant.
A newer model replicant.
Yes, who is a Blade Runner. So, it's really weird because a replicant is a Blade Runner.
Excuse me.
And he ends up meeting up again with Deckard, and in the beginning, near the beginning of the movie, you know, he's figuring out that there was a replicant that was born from another one, which isn't supposed to be possible. But and then it turns out that Rachel was the one who bore the replicant, and
Rachel being the original replicant that
Deckard fell in love
with in the first movie.
Yeah.
And they just so happen to have a kid who becomes a memory maker in the year 2049. And the real twist that I find kind of spectacular, but surprisingly retrograde, is that the character Kay, or Joe, played by Ryan Gosling, is thinking for the longest time in the movie, and might I say, a really, really long movie, like 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes, just sit there, be patient kind of movie. He begins to think that the memory of him being born and him having actual memories instead of implanted ones is the reasoning behind figuring out if he was born or if he was made. And again, spoiler alert, he finds out that they were implanted memories, and the memory maker is the real daughter of Deckard and stuff. But either way, that's just the basic gist of it. How it all comes together is definitely convoluted, and I certainly hope they don't make multiple cuts of this movie just like they did the last one, because as much as it's nice to see everyone's different perspectives, it can get a little bit, here and there, he said, she said kind of, deal or whatnot, but it's just a small nitpick amongst what I believe is probably going to end up as one of the greatest movies of the year 2017, right next to a select few. And you could picture that what you might be, but, either way, me and Mitch definitely have no choice but to recommend both adaptations of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So if you haven't already, definitely see the first Blade Runner before you watch Blade Runner 2049, but then again, we just spoiled everything, so you've been warned, but that's just the way it ought to be.
You probably do the exact same intro or something very similar when you do these movie review bazaars.
Yeah, pretty much.
Again, spoiler alert.
Yeah. Yes. But this is one of your favorite movies, Mitch.
Yes.
Well, both of them, I guess.
I thought
to the pantheon.
I thought that the first one was a little bit more understandable. Once I watch this again, I may add a comment to the actual podcast and basically reflect on what I thought was erroneous or something, because I was somewhat thoroughly confused by a couple of plot points. I didn't understand in the beginning of the movie why exactly that there was this lady who was stalking and trying to kill Kay or Joe, and it turned out it was because they're trying to make replicants and they don't want anybody to figure out that they can be born. At least that's what Marshall got a better read on it than me, and that's what he said.
Well, either way, I think really what makes both Blade Runner movies standout features would definitely have to be its commentary on the future. And futurism, I think, is something that the whole entire concept and the plot just stands for, because we are coming into a world where class warfare and freely available information as it is bought and sold is something that is not only concerning, but could go completely haywire and out of hand.
And it can bring down entire civilizations, and it's very serious.
To the point where we consider teaching or just anything in the service industry has menial tasks that should just be straight up left up for robots, creating this draconian society where only a few select humans are allowed to live, whether or not they fit some sort of IQ level or something arbitrary like that. It's definitely huge, and it's definitely something to think about. But not only that, on a lighter note, I think the thing that we found a little weird and yet kind of pathetic in Blade Runner 2049 is the fact that Ryan Gosling's character has a virtual hologram girlfriend.
Yeah. So I thought that company was called like Wallace or something. And
Yeah, who has the Peter and the Wolf intro whenever they turn on the products.
They make a bunch of AI stuff like virtual companions, and there was no real explanation of that. I think that there's just the head honcho of like that company turned out that he just wanted to make replicants to serve him, kind of thing.
I have to say this.
I don't understand why.
I have to say this. Just like the original Blade Runner, the effects in Blade Runner 2049 are spectacular. The cinematography is top-notch. It's just a beautiful film to look at, especially the effects they do with the actual head honcho dude of the big company that has like the rooms with the flashing lights and replicants coming out of these little birth bags, and it's really something. And but then they have the part where the virtual girlfriend and the little pleasure bot at the beginning, they just come together for a swell time, which leads me to believe and think this. Why would you have holograms for girlfriends if you could just straight up have a pleasure bot just do to your bidding?
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
I just feel like it's a little bit redundant. Maybe it was just an excuse to play around with a certain type of effects. But again, small nitpicks in the grand scheme of things. Harrison Ford's character, as he does come back in the 2049 sequel movie, is definitely great. And unlike other franchise sequels, it doesn't feel phoned in whatsoever. Everybody does look like that they're taking this extremely seriously, and for good reason. It's a great plot. It's a great story. And I'll say this before the cat allergies kick in, because Mitch has cats and I'm allergic to cats. This is definitely one of those things that you really don't have to be a complete futurist in terms of just the subject matter. You don't have to necessarily understand technology and futurism to a point in order to really understand and enjoy Blade Runner 2049 and the original. I think it's just one of those series of movies that can be complex, but it can also be really nice. Fun to look at, just great movie fun, great time in the theaters, to just say the very, very least. I'm sure you can agree with me on all these points, Mitch. It's just, just something that's just great. And I can see you're already getting on that bacon reader, just reading up Reddit on your phone, which means you're definitely bored of this already. I am too. So let's just go ahead and close things out. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Marshall's Bazaar. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Don't forget to follow me on social media and subscribe on YouTube for more Marshall Brown content all the time. Special thanks to you, Mitchell Thompson, for coming in on this podcast and shadowing in with your thoughts.
Yeah, no problem.
Any final thoughts on both of the movies before we shut things down?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you're... So the reason why I got... I was introduced to like Blade Runner in the first place was when I was in a philosophy class in high school, and it was a movie meant to exhibit attitudes we have towards other beings. Like, I mean, the slogan that they keep repeating in the movie from the corporation itself was that the replicants are like more human than human. And, like, what are the implications of having something that's created and basically human but not born? And there's just a lot of... There's a lot of really deep philosophy behind that. And by the end of the film, you start to actually kind of sympathize with the replicants, even though they're not actually real, so to speak, in the movie universe. And I just think that if you're into philosophical inquiry, especially, this would be a great... thing, not just to watch, but also to analyze and think about. So
yeah, it's a classic tale of humanism versus future technology. Definitely a huge thumbs up recommendation from the both of us. But with that said, I think I'm gonna just tool around with Mitch's HTC Vive before I drive back. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget
to this 16-minute podcast.
Oh, please, it's a lot to talk about. Be sure to come back next week where we'll be talking about more movies and other things and more hot topics for Marshall's Bazaar, and keep a lookout on November 5th for the third Many Outfits of Marshall Brown video, the last in the Many Outfits trilogy. That'll all be coming soon. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see and hear y'all next time. Marshall Brown, out!